Dawn has not yet broken over the Philippine Sea. It is 0347 hours, June 19, 1944, and the destroyer USS Picking cuts through black water at 28 knots, her bow slicing foam that vanishes into absolute darkness. No moon, no stars, just the hum of turbines and the metallic taste of salt spray on the lips of men who cannot see their own hands. On the bridge, Ensign Robert Hagan grips the brass rail, his knuckles white, his eyes useless. Somewhere out there, perhaps 2 miles, perhaps 10, a Japanese cruiser is hunting them, or they are hunting it. In this blindness, the distinction feels academic. The ocean is a void, the enemy is a ghost, and yet, in the crammed combat information center 3 decks below, a young radio man named Eddie Morales watches a pale green glow bloom on a circular screen, a luminous pip emerging from static like a star being born. He keys the intercom. Contact bearing 095, range 8,000 yards. His voice is calm. He is 22 years old. He has never fired a gun in anger, but he has just seen through the night. U.S. Navy War Diary, USS Picking, June 1944. The Japanese cruiser Haguro does not know it is being watched. Her lookouts scan the horizon with binoculars, their vision reaching perhaps 4 miles on a clear day, but this is not a clear day. This is the hour before dawn, when the sea and sky dissolve into one another, when a destroyer 5 miles distant might as well be on the moon. Her captain, a veteran of Guadalcanal, trusts his eyes, his instincts, the ancient covenant between sailor and sea. He does not trust machines. He does not know that a rotating antenna atop the American destroyer is hurling invisible pulses into the darkness, electromagnetic waves bouncing off his steel hull and returning to that glowing screen below decks. He does not know that the Americans have taught metal to see technical manual for radar equipment. U.S. Naval Institute, 1944. At 0351 hours, Picking opens fire. 5-inch shells arc across 3 miles of empty black, their trajectories calculated not by eyesight, but by mathematics whispered through copper wire. The first salvo brackets Haguro, perfectly 1 shell long, 1 short. The third, a direct hit on her forward turret. Orange flame erupts in the darkness. Japanese sailors scream in confusion. Where is the enemy? How can they fire so accurately when we cannot even see them? The cruiser's guns swivel wildly, firing at shadows, at memory, at hope. Her shells splash harmlessly into the sea a mile off target. Picking fires again and again. By 0359, Haguro is burning, listing 7 degrees to port, her captain dead, her crew abandoning ship into water slick with fuel oil. The Americans have fired 68 shells. The Japanese have not landed a single hit. U.S. Navy After Action Report. Destroyer Squadron 48, June 1944. This is not an isolated incident. This is the new shape of war. Across the Pacific in the summer of 1944, American destroyers and cruisers are winning battles that should be impossible. At Surigao Strait in October, Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's battleships and destroyers will detect and annihilate a Japanese task force in total darkness, firing with such precision that enemy commanders believe they have sailed into a minefield. U.S. 7th Fleet War Diary, October 1944. Off Leyte Guelph, destroyer escorts no larger than fishing trawlers will track and engage heavy cruisers at ranges beyond visual contact, dancing through salvos they can predict before they land. The pattern repeats in the Solomon Islands, the Marianas, the approaches to Okinawa. American ships fight as if the sun never sets. Japanese ships fight as if they are blind. The Imperial Japanese Navy enters 1944 with a doctrine forged in a different century. Its officers have trained since boyhood in night combat, in visual acuity, sharpened by relentless drills. In the samurai ideal of closing to point-blank range where courage and steel resolve all questions, they possess the long lance torpedo, a 24-inch monster with a range of 20 miles, the finest ship-killing weapon in any Navy's arsenal. Jane's Fighting Ships, 1943. They have optical rangefinders of extraordinary quality, Zeiss lenses ground to micrometer precision. They have crews who can identify ship silhouettes at 4,000 yards in moonlight. For a decade, they have owned the night. They have sunk American cruisers at Savo Island, humiliated Allied task forces at Tassafaronga, turned the waters off Guadalcanal into an American graveyard. Night combat is their realm, their advantage, their birthright. But in 1944, the night has been colonized by invisible light. The technology is called radar, an acronym for radio detection and ranging, a phrase that means nothing to most sailors and everything to the few who understand. It is not new. Both Britain and Germany have experimented with it since the late 1930s, but American industry has refined it, miniaturized it, mass-produced it with a speed that stuns even Allied observers. By mid-1944, nearly every destroyer, cruiser, and battleship in the U.S. Navy carries at least one radar set, and most carry several air search radar scanning the sky out to 100 miles, surface search radar probing the horizon, fire control radar guiding guns onto targets hidden by darkness, fog, or rain. U.S. Naval Technical Mission to Japan, Report 054, 1945. The Japanese have radar to primitive sets, cobbled together from captured examples and reverse-engineered components, but their sets are bulky, unreliable, and so distrusted by commanders that they are often switched off to avoid detection. The Americans have turned theirs into eyes. The implications ripple outward like shockwaves. A destroyer captain no longer waits for dawn or moonlight to engage. He no longer relies on the subjective judgment of lookouts straining through binoculars. He has a machine that tells him, with cold certainty, where every ship within 10 miles is located, how fast it is moving, whether it is turning toward him or away. He can fire his guns in a typhoon. He can lay an ambush in fog so thick a man cannot see his own feet. He can predict an enemy's course and speed and position his ship to rake its beam, with gunfire before the enemy knows he is there. The radar does not grow tired. It does not blink. It does not feel fear. It simply sees, and in seeing, it has rewritten the rules of naval warfare so completely that the Imperial Japanese Navy, possessor of the world's finest night fighting doctrine, become obsolete without realizing it. But how did this happen? What did the Americans know that their enemies could not fathom? And why, in the desperate final year of the Pacific War, did Japanese commanders continue to seek night battles they could no longer win? The answer lies not in a single invention, but in a revolutionary marriage of physics, engineering, and industrial might that began in a laboratory and ended in the darkness of the Philippine Sea, where men like Eddie Morales stared at glowing screens and saw the future. The revolution begins not with admirals or warships, but with a Scottish physicist named Robert Watt, who in 1935 proves that radio waves can detect aircraft at distance, and with American engineers at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C., who in 1937 build a crude prototype that can spot a destroyer at 8 miles. The device has monstrous antennas the size of bed frames, transmitters that weigh 300 pounds, cathode ray tubes scavenged from oscilloscopes, but it works. By 1940, with war consuming Europe and the Pacific trembling on the edge, the U.S. Navy places its first production orders. The sets are designated CXAM, weighing over 7 tons, requiring dedicated operators and constant maintenance. They are installed on battleships and aircraft carriers, where space and power are abundant. They are fragile. They are Revolutionary Naval Research Laboratory Report. Development of radar systems, 1935 to 1945. But the true breakthrough comes in 1941, when engineers at the MIT Radiation Laboratory, funded by frantic wartime contracts and staffed by physicists pulled from universities across America, developed the cavity magnet, a British invention refined to American production standards. The magnetron generates microwave frequency pulses at 10 centimeters wavelength, far shorter than earlier meterwave systems. Shorter wavelengths mean smaller antennas. Smaller antennas mean radar can fit on destroyers, on PT boats, even on fighter aircraft. More critically, microwave radar produces sharper returns, clearer images, finer resolution. A destroyer at 5 miles no longer appears as a vague blob, but as a distinct pip whose size and shape reveal its heading and speed. By 1942, the first SG surface search radar sets are rolling off assembly lines at RCA, Raytheon, and General Electric, each unit weighing just 400 pounds, mountable on a destroyer's masthead, powered by the ship's own generators. MIT Radiation Laboratory Series, Volume 1, Radar System Engineering, 1947. The Japanese know radar exists. Their intelligence services have captured reports. Their engineers have examined wreckage from downed American planes. But they fundamentally misunderstand its implications. To a Japanese naval officer trained in Bushido traditions and optical fire control, radar is a curiosity, a backup system for poor weather. a crutch for sailors who lack proper training. Why rely on a machine when the human eye, properly disciplined, can see farther and judge better? A cruiser captain writes in his diary after a briefing on captured American equipment. Diary of Captain Tomochi Hira, IJN, translated excerpt, 1950. This is not arrogance born of ignorance. It is the logic of an institutional culture that has spent 20 years perfecting night combat through human excellence. The Americans have taken a different path. They have made the machine better than the man. Consider the SG radar in detail. A rotating parabolic antenna, 36 inches across, spinning at 15 revolutions per minute, mounted atop a destroyer's foremast. It transmits pulses of microwave energy lasting 1 microsecond, each pulse containing 5 kilowatts of power. The pulses travel outward at the speed of light. 186,000 miles per second, bounce off any metallic surface larger than a rowboat, and return as faint echoes detected by a receiver so sensitive it can register 1/1000th of a watt. The time delay between transmission and echo reveals range. A pulse that returns after 60 microseconds has traveled 9 miles round trip, placing the target 4.5 miles away. The antenna's rotation reveals bearing. The strength of the return suggests target size. All of this information displays on a circular plan position indicator screen in the Combat Information Center, a darkened room deep in the ship where enlisted men trained in radar interpretation plot contacts on transparent plotting boards and feed firing solutions to the gunnery director above. Technical Manual TMI 11 to 467, Fire Control Radar, U.S. Navy Bureau of Ordnance, 1944. The men who operate these systems are not supermen. They are radioman third class, yeoman technicians plucked from civilian life and trained in crash courses at MIT, Harvard, and the Navy's radar schools in California and Hawaii. They learn to read the screen's green glow, to distinguish a destroyer's sharp return from a merchantman's broad echo, to filter out false returns from sea clutter and rains. They work in 8-hour watches, their eyes adapting to the dim light, their fingers adjusting gain and tuning knobs with the practiced precision of pianists. They are, in a very real sense, the new eyes of the fleet, and they are terrifyingly effective. The proof arrives in the darkness of November 30th, 1942, off Tassafaronga on Guadalcanal's northwestern coast. 5 American cruisers and 6 destroyers, commanded by Rear Admiral Carlton Wright, patrolled the waters where Japanese destroyers have been running supply convoys, the infamous Tokyo Express, for months. At 2,306 hours, radar operators aboard the cruiser USS Minneapolis detect contacts at 23,000 yards, 11 miles distant in absolute darkness. Wright's formation turns to intercept. The Japanese destroyers, loaded with supply drums and utterly unaware they have been spotted, continue on course. At 2,316, American cruisers open fire from 7 miles away, their 6-inch and 8-inch guns guided entirely by radar. The lead Japanese destroyer, Takanami, erupts in flame, her hull shattered by shells she never saw coming. But the Japanese react with stunning speed, launching 34 long lance torpedoes in a spread calculated by instinct and training. 8 minutes later, those torpedoes strike home. 3 American cruisers crippled, 1 destroyer sunk, 395 American sailors dead. U.S. Naval War College analysis. Battle of Tassafaronga, 1943. Tassafaronga is both triumph and disaster, proof of radar's power and its limits. The Americans saw first and fired first, but radar cannot detect torpedoes in the water, cannot predict the desperate counterattack of cornered destroyers. The lesson is absorbed. In the months that follow, American doctrine evolves. Destroyers, smaller and more agile than cruisers, are pushed forward as radar pickets, their SG sets scanning ahead while the heavy ships hang back, ready to pummel any contact the destroyers illuminate. Tactics are refined. Cross the enemy's T using radar-guided positioning. Launch torpedoes at ranges where visual tracking is impossible. Use radar to predict enemy maneuvers and position ambushes accordingly. Commander Destroyer Squadron 48. Tactical Bulletin for B-44. February 1944. By the summer of 1944, the transformation is complete. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, American destroyers and cruisers form radar picket lines 100 miles from the carrier task forces, detecting incoming Japanese air raids long before human eyes could spot them. vectoring fighters onto targets with such precision that American pilots joke they could do it blindfolded. U.S. Naval Air Combat Intelligence Report, June 1944. Japanese pilots, accustomed to surprise attacks at dawn or dusk, find themselves intercepted 30 miles from their targets by Hellcats already positioned at their altitude and heading. How do they know? A captured pilot asks his interrogators, "How can they see us through clouds and darkness?" The interrogator has no answer the pilot would believe. ATIS Interrogation Report, 380, July 1944. Dramatized composite. Then comes Surigao Strait. On the night of October 24th to 25th, 1944, Admiral Jesse Oldendorf positions 6 battleships, 5 of them veterans, resurrected from Pearl Harbor's Mudat, the northern exit of Surigao Strait, a narrow waterway in the southern Philippines. Japanese Admiral Shoji Nishimura, commanding 2 battleships, 1 cruiser, and 4 destroyers, steams north into the strait under cover of darkness, confident that night will shield him until he can close to torpedo range. He does not know that American destroyers equipped with SG radar have been tracking him since 2,200 hours from positions 15 miles ahead. He does not know that Oldendorf's battleships have been fed continuous range and bearing updates for over an hour. Their 14-inch and 16-inch guns trained and waiting. At 0351 hours, on October 25th, the American battle line opens fire from 22,800 yards 12 miles in pitch darkness. Radar-directed shells bracket Nishimura's flagship Yamashiro on the 3rd salvo. For 14 minutes, 6 battleships and 8 cruisers pour shells onto targets they cannot see with their own eyes. When the firing stops, both Japanese battleships are sinking. The cruiser is a burning wreck, and 3 destroyers are dead in the water. Nishimura goes down with his ship. The Americans suffer 0 losses. It is the last battleship versus battleship engagement in history, and it is won entirely by machines that see in darkness. U.S. 7th Fleet Action Report. Battle of Surigao Strait, November 1944. A Japanese survivor, rescued days later by Filipino guerrillas, describes the experience in his interrogation. "We saw nothing, only muzzle flashes on the horizon, like lightning in a storm. The shells came out of nowhere. Our rangefinders showed nothing. Our lookouts saw nothing. We were firing at ghosts." ATIS Interrogation Report 412. November 1944. Dramatized composite. The ghosts had names. They were called SG, SC, MK8, MK12, letters and numbers assigned by engineers, who never imagined their acronyms would mean the difference between life and death. They were built by women in factories in Massachusetts and New Jersey, soldered together on assembly lines where precision measured in millimeters determined whether a destroyer lived or died 3,000 miles away. They were maintained by technicians who climbed mastheads in typhoons to replace burnt-out who tuned waveguides with jeweler's precision, who kept the machines running when salt spray corroded connections and tropical heat melted insulation. Bureau of Ships Technical Bulletin. Maintenance of radar equipment in tropical climates, May 1944. By late 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy has lost the night forever, and in losing the night, it has lost the war at sea. The question now is not whether American destroyers can hunt in darkness, but how this invisible revolution will reshape every battle yet to come. The strategic consequences ripple outward through the final year of the Pacific War, like concentric waves from a depth charge. By early 1945, American destroyer divisions operate with an impunity that would have been suicidal 2 years earlier. Off Okinawa, radar picket destroyers station themselves 50 miles from the invasion fleet. Their SG and SK air search sets spinning forming an electronic fence that detects incoming kamikaze raids at ranges up to 70 miles. The kamikazes still come desperate pilots in obsolete aircraft. Their fuel tanks barely sufficient for one-way missions, but they no longer achieve surprise. American combat air patrols, vectored onto intercept courses by radar-equipped destroyers, shred the attacks before they reach the anchorage. Between April and June 1945, radar picket destroyers detect over 1,900 incoming raids, vector fighters onto 83% of them, and reduce what might have been catastrophic losses to a grinding, costly, but survivable campaign. U.S. Navy Operational Archives. Okinawa Radar Picket Action Reports, 1945. The psychological impact on Japanese naval personnel is profound and measurable. Post-war interrogations of surviving officers reveal a recurring theme: technological despair. "We trained for 10 years to fight at night," a destroyer captain tells his American interrogators in September 1945. "We believed our superior optics and night fighting discipline made us invincible after dark. Then we discovered the Americans had eliminated darkness itself. What is the purpose of training when the enemy changes the fundamental nature of reality?" U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, Interrogation of Japanese Officers, Naval Analysis Division, Report 62. December 1945. Composite. "This is not mere defeat, it is the collapse of an institutional identity." The Imperial Japanese Navy had built its doctrine around human excellence. Rigorous training, superior night vision cultivated through years of discipline. Radar rendered all of it obsolete. It was as if a medieval swordsman, after decades perfecting his blade technique, discovered his opponent wielding a rifle. American morale soars in inverse proportion. Destroyer crews, once anxious about operating beyond visual range of friendly forces, now patrol with confidence bordering on aggression. A gunnery officer aboard USS Hazelwood writes home in March 1945, "We hunt at night now like owls. The Japs still have their long lances and their guts, but we have radar, and it's better than guts. We see them on the scope 10 miles out, and by the time they spot our muzzle flashes, they're already taking hits. It's not sporting, it's not fair, it's war, and we're winning." Personal correspondence. Lieutenant James Harrington, USS Hazelwood, March 1945, U.S. Naval Institute Archives. "This transformation from fear to confidence is not abstract, it translates into tactical boldness, into destroyer captains willing to press attacks against superior forces, into a fleet-wide culture that trusts the machines more than their own instincts." The industrial dimension of this advantage cannot be overstated. By war's end, American factories have produced over 100,000 radar sets of all types of surface search, fire control, airborne intercept, more than the rest of the world combined. MIT Radiation Laboratory Report. Wartime Production Summary, 1946. The Raytheon plant in Waltham, Massachusetts, alone manufactures 85% of the magnetrons used in American naval radar. Its assembly lines staffed largely by women who wind copper coils and solder connections with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. A single magnetron requires 17 hours of skilled labor to produce. By 1944, Raytheon is producing over 1,000 per month. General Electric's plant in Schenectady manufactures the transmitter units. RCA in Camden, New Jersey, builds the display consoles. Western Electric supplies the waveguide. The entire apparatus of American industrial capitalism, converted to war production, sustains the radar advantage through sheer manufacturing volume. Bureau of Ships Production Report. Radar Manufacturing and Distribution 1942 to 1945, January 1946. Maintenance proves as critical as production. A radar set operating in the tropical Pacific where humidity reaches 95%, where salt spray corrodes electronics within days, where temperatures inside a steel ship can exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit requires constant care. Navy technicians develop field expedients that never appear in manuals. Coating waveguide connections with petroleum jelly to prevent corrosion. Using cigarette lighter fluid to clean moisture-fouled contacts. Wrapping magnetrons in canvas impregnated with wax to shield them from salt air. The Bureau of Ships publishes monthly technical bulletins addressing common failures, distributing them to every destroyer and cruiser in the fleet. By mid-1944, the Navy operates a global logistics network dedicated solely to radar maintenance, spare parts flown to forward bases, specialized technicians rotated through ships on 30-day maintenance cycles, training schools in Pearl Harbor and Ulithi, turning out radar technicians at a rate of 300 per month. Bureau of Ships Technical Bulletin, 33B, Radar Maintenance in Forward Areas, August 1944. The Japanese attempt to adapt, but their efforts reveal the limits of catching up to an exponential technology curve. In late 1944, Imperial Navy engineers developed the Type 22 surface search radar, a microwave set roughly equivalent to the American SG. It enters service in January 1945, installed on a handful of surviving cruisers and destroyers, but by then, American radar technology has advanced again. The SG-6 model offers double the range and better resolution. while new fire control radars like the Mk-25 can track multiple targets simultaneously and calculate firing solutions automatically. The Japanese Type 22 is adequate. The American sets are superior. More critically, Japan lacks the industrial capacity to mass-produce radar sets, even if the designs were equivalent. American factories produced 200 naval radar sets per month in early 1945. Japanese factories managed 12. Japanese Naval Technical Bureau Report. Captured document, translated in USSB's Report 83, 1946. The gap is unbridgeable. The doctrine that emerges from this technological revolution extends far beyond World War II. In the 1950s, American naval theorists studying the Pacific War conclude that information dominance, the ability to detect, track, and engage enemies beyond their sensor ranges, the decisive factor in modern naval combat. This insight shapes Cold War naval doctrine. The development of AEGIS, radar systems capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously, the integration of radar data with computerized combat systems, the concept of network-centric warfare where every ship and aircraft share sensor data in real time. The destroyer escorts that hunted in darkness off the Philippines become the intellectual ancestors of the Ticonderoga-class cruisers that dominated the Persian Gulf in 1991. Their SPY-1 radar arrays, scanning 360 degrees simultaneously, tracking Iraqi aircraft at ranges exceeding 200 miles. U.S. Naval War College Review. Lessons of the Pacific War for Modern Naval Doctrine, Spring 1992. Even more broadly, the radar revolution demonstrates a principle that transcends specific technologies. In modern industrialized warfare, the side that can see first, strike first, and coordinate faster the side that turns information into action with the least delay holds an advantage no amount of courage or training can overcome. The samurai ethos of the Imperial Japanese Navy was genuine. Its night fighting skills were real. Its long lance torpedoes were the finest in the world. None of it mattered when American radioman could see through fog and darkness, when destroyers could fire accurately at targets beyond visual range, when entire task forces could maneuver based on information harvested from invisible electromagnetic pulses. The human cost of this advantage is measured not just in Japanese ships sunk and sailors drowned, but in American sailors who came home. How many destroyer crews survived battles they would have lost without radar? The counterfactual is impossible to calculate with precision, but naval historians have attempted estimates. At Surigao Strait, without radar fire control, Oldendorf's battleships would have closed to visual range perhaps 5 miles, where Japanese torpedoes would have had devastating effect. Losses might have matched or exceeded the disaster at Savo Island. At Okinawa, without radar pickets vectoring fighters onto kamikaze raids, the invasion fleet might have suffered losses sufficient to delay or even derail the campaign. One conservative analysis suggests radar reduced American naval casualties in the final 18 months of the Pacific War by approximately 30 to 40%. Naval War College Operational Analysis, Impact of Radar on Pacific Campaign Casualties, 1989. The engineers who made this possible rarely received recognition proportional to their impact. Robert Watt was knighted. Luis Alvarez, who refined airborne radar at MIT, won a Nobel Prize in Physics decades later for unrelated work. But the hundreds of technicians at Raytheon, the women soldering magnetron components at General Electric, the radar operators sweating in darkened combat information centers, they returned to civilian life without parades, their contribution classified for years, their names absent from most histories. Yet their work changed naval warfare as profoundly as the introduction of steam power or the aircraft carrier. On the morning of August 15, 1945, when Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast crackles through Japanese radios, American destroyers are still patrolling off the home islands, their radar set sweeping the approaches to Tokyo Bay. The war ends not with a single climactic engagement, but with the accumulated weight of 1,000 small advantages: better logistics, better code breaking, better training, better radar. The last advantage, the invisible one, may have been the most decisive. A final image. In September 1945, as American destroyers enter Tokyo Bay for the surrender ceremony, their SG radar antennas still rotating atop their masts, a Japanese destroyer captain stands on the deck of his disarmed ship and watches them pass. He has survived the war through a combination of skill and luck. But he knows his navy died long before the Emperor's broadcast. They made the night into day. He tells a fellow officer in a conversation recorded by an American interpreter, "We fought with our eyes and our hearts. They fought with machines that never slept. There is no honor in losing to a machine, but there is also no shame. We were simply born into the wrong century." Interrogation transcript. Captain Tomochi Hara, IJN, September 1945. Dramatized composite. But it was not the wrong century, it was the century when war industrialized completely, when victory belonged not to the bravest or the most skilled, but to the side that could convert scientific knowledge into mass-produced technology faster than the enemy could adapt. In the darkness of the Philippine Sea, in the straits around Guadalcanal, off the shores of Okinawa, American destroyers hunted with invisible light, and in doing so, they rewrote the rules by which navies would fight for the next 80 years. The lesson endures. In modern war, the side that sees first wins. Everything else is just counting the bodies.